A paragraph sits in a United States government report that nobody has been able to explain. Navy assets off the coast of Virginia observed about 100 airborne objects. Underneath them, two vessels moving on the surface, apparently with nobody aboard. Guess how much the report says about it? One paragraph. No date, no conclusion, still under investigation. That is not a rumor from the internet. It is in the official annual report on this subject. And it is one item out of 319 from a single year. Since 2022, there has been an office whose entire job is to explain these. It sits inside the Department of Defense, and it has a deliberately boring name. Its work is mostly unglamorous, and the unglamorous part is the important part. Guess how many of those 319 reports it managed to close? 114. Balloons, birds, satellites, aircraft, drones. One was a rocket launch. One, genuinely, was a man wearing a jetpack. That is the useful thing about this office. It keeps subtracting. Every year, it takes the pile of the unexplained and makes it smaller. So the interesting number is never the big one. It is what is left after the subtracting. Of that year's pile, 191 were shelved for lack of data. 9 went for further analysis. Not because they were spooky, because nobody could match what was described to anything ordinary.
Crews reported speeds and turns unlike anything we have built, with no instrument data attached. Objects that crews reported crossing from air into water, which the office says it has never confirmed. Objects described with no wings, no exhaust plume, and no obvious way of staying up. Guess what the office says is the biggest problem with these cases? Not secrecy, bad data. Military sensors are built to find aircraft and missiles, not to study something unknown. So the honest position is the boring one. Not enough information, case open. Something makes this wave different from every previous one, and it is not the videos. The witnesses are the most heavily instrumented people on the planet. Fighter crews, warship radar, infrared cameras designed to track missiles. And the sightings cluster around the same kinds of places, over and over. Coastlines, carrier groups, test ranges, which is also exactly where the sensors already are. Guess what the official position on origin is as of this year? There is no verifiable evidence of extraterrestrial technology. That is the stated finding. So everything from this point onwards is not fact. It is people trying to explain a gap. The gap is older than any of these videos, and it has a name. In 1950, a physicist asked a question over lunch that nobody has answered since. The galaxy is old. There has been time for a civilization to spread across all of it. Even at slow speeds, a few million years is enough. The galaxy is billions of years old. So the puzzle is not that the galaxy lacks time or room or stars. Guess what the actual question is? Where is everybody? That is it. That is the whole problem. And every explanation anyone has offered falls into one of two families. Either nobody is out there, or somebody is out there and we are not seeing them. The second family has an idea in it that is over 50 years old. A researcher proposed it in 1973, and it is uncomfortable to sit with. What if they are here, they know about us, and they have decided not to interfere? Not out of kindness, out of the same instinct that makes us fence off a nature reserve. You do not walk into the reserve and introduce yourself to the animals. Guess what that would predict about the evidence? Exactly what we have. Things seen at the edges. Never a landing, never a conversation. Always enough to argue about, never enough to prove. Now the harder version of the same idea, published in a spaceflight journal in 2001. If you can build the fence, you can also build the view. A civilization that far ahead would not need to hide behind the horizon. It could simply arrange what we are allowed to detect. And you would never find the edge of that because the edge is part of the arrangement. One version of this sounds like science fiction and is actually just geometry.
Imagine something that lives entirely on a flat sheet and cannot conceive of up. Now hold your hand above the sheet and lower one finger through it. From inside the sheet, a circle appears out of nothing, grows, shrinks, and vanishes. Guess what that flat creature reports? An object with impossible behavior that arrived from nowhere and left the same way. It is not wrong. It is describing a hand correctly, using only the words it has. Now apply that one level up to us. Something moving through a direction we cannot point at would look exactly like this. Instant acceleration because it is not pushing against our air. No exhaust because nothing is being burned in our 3 dimensions. Appearing and disappearing on radar because it is only intersecting us in passing. Nobody has evidence for that, but it is worth noticing how well it fits. The stranger version of the idea is the one the films borrow, and it is the hardest to shake. For us, time only runs one way, and we are carried along it, whether we like it or not. But there is nothing in the physics that says it has to be experienced that way. Guess what happens if something can move through time the way we move through a room? It does not need to travel to us. It only needs to choose when to be here. Every one of these sightings across every decade would be the same visit. 1996 and 2026 would be 2 doors in the same corridor. And a civilization like that would not be interested in landing on a lawn. What could we possibly offer? Something for which time itself is furniture. If any of that were true, the only thing left to offer is being watched. That is a story that fits, not a fact. All of this leaves us somewhere specific, and I want to be exact about where. Everything from the zoo onwards is a story people tell to fill a hole in the evidence. None of it is proven. Some of it may not even be testable. But 3 things are documented, and those are the ones worth holding on to. Military sensors keep recording things that trained crews cannot identify. A government office is subtracting explanations from that pile every year. And after all the subtracting, a number of cases stays stubbornly on the table. Guess which of those 3 should actually change how you think? The third one. Not because it proves anything, but because it has not gone away. The most interesting thing in the world right now is a list that refuses to reach 0.